What's going on, you guys, and welcome to the Acura NSX, one of my favorite cars of all time. Today we will be reviewing Jimmy's 1992 Formula Red NSX. It's an NA1 model with 83,000 miles, and like me and my NSX, Jimmy just started modding this car recently. He's put on a set of KWV3 coilovers, Volk CE28N wheels, a high-tech exhaust, and perhaps most importantly, he's installed the JDM 5-speed short gear set with a Type R final drive. The engine, of course, is the legendary C30A 3-liter naturally aspirated V6 with VTEC, one of the first engines with VTEC. From the factory, it made 270 horsepower and 210 pound-feet of torque, but with the Comtech headers and the exhaust that Jimmy's put on, it's probably making a few more. I mean, Honda really did squeeze just about everything they could out of the C30A. But thankfully, the car only weighs around 3,000 pounds, so the power to weight ratio, still pretty good. What a sound, what an engine. This high-tech exhaust really sounds great. It has a deep tone to it. Beautiful road here in Southern California. Beautiful NSX. I am having an absolute blast. KWV3 suspension, pretty much considered the gold standard amongst NSXs. And it's doing a really good job at soaking up the bumps here. It's definitely not too stiff, but much stiffer than stock, which is a good thing. The stock NA1 suspension is far too soft for performance driving. Jimmy has great taste in cars. He's got a bone stock AP1 S2K, bone stock AP2, a 981 GT4, a 997 GT3, and of course this NSX. He's had this car for almost 8 years, and he bought it back when NSXs were still affordable. Nowadays, as we all know, these cars have become somewhat unobtainium. What a car, what a machine. The 5-speed short gear set and Type R final drive really make this thing so much more engaging to drive on a tight road. I can actually use the engine's power band. I can enjoy this brilliant 5-speed manual that much more. And between second and third gear for most of this very tight road. Whereas with a stock USDM gear set, I'd be in second gear this whole way. Gotta love a cable throttle. So good. Lots of mid-corner grip. Love this mid-engine balance. You really just feel like the car is pivoting around its center point. This car has a very low center of gravity as well. I mean, look how low this car sits. Driving Jimmy's car is making me even more stoked to go home and get behind the wheel of mine. It's an everyday supercar. That's how it was marketed back in the early 90s. And even today, 33 years later, this car is still one that you can drive every single day. It's reliable, it's comfortable, it's easy to drive. I would say the only thing that might give owners a second thought before grabbing the keys to the NSX is the unfortunate fact that parts production, to my knowledge, has pretty much stopped. So if something does break, if something does need replacing, it is quite a challenge to find parts nowadays. Oh man, what a freaking awesome car. The short gears really just made this thing so much better to drive. It's a mod I still want for mine, but the cost is just prohibitive nowadays. Just feel every little bump and camber, every little pebble even in the road. Very few cars can match this for steering feel. The only one that comes to mind is the Lotus Elise and Exige. Woo! This car's still so easy to drive hard. It feels so natural to me. It's just incredible what Honda's engineers were able to achieve over 3 decades ago. Ooh, that steering gets heavy in the hairpins. You have to be ready to just grip this wheel with everything you've got. Woo! Shifting just to shift. Time to calm down. My heart rate feels like it's pumping at 120 BPM just from driving. I'm still at a loss for words every time I drive a properly modified one like Jimmy's. It is just one of the purest, most visceral, yet still confidence-inspiring cars you can drive. Even 33 years later, comparing it to modern cars, this NSX still holds its own. It's time to bring this back and hop into one of Jimmy's other cars, his 997.1 GT3. Today is turning out to be a pretty damn good day. Both cars have naturally aspirated high revving engines that rev to over 8 grand, manual transmissions, rear limited slip differentials. They both are known for their steering feel and excellent handling. Let's find out which car is better to drive on a canyon road. I'm genuinely curious because that GT3 I've driven before and it was one of my top 10 cars, hands down. And the NSX is right up there with it, but how do they compare back to back on the same road? That's what we're gonna find out. All right, we're now in the 997.1 generation Porsche 911 GT3. One of my favorite driving cars of all time. Jimmy is such a legend for having both of these cars in his garage. So a few specs about the car. It's powered by a 3.6 liter naturally aspirated Metzger flat 6, revs to about 8,400 RPM, makes 415 horsepower, and right around 300 pound-feet of torque. Sends all that power to the rear wheels via the 6-speed manual transmission. It's got a mechanical limited slip differential like the NSX. The car weighs a little bit more than the NSX, but the key difference, of course, is the fact that this is rear engine. The engine really is hanging out over the back of the car, over the rear axle. Now right away, and I haven't even started pushing the car yet, I'm noticing just that the steering gets quite light when you first turn in. The car just feels like it doesn't have much weight over the front axle. Gotta love a Metzger flat 6. This car has such good steering feel. Hydraulic steering, you feel everything about the road texture. Excellent brakes as well. This doesn't have the carbon ceramics, but for canyon driving, you just simply don't need them. Such a firm brake pedal in classic Porsche fashion. But here's where the GT3's inherent engine layout rears its somewhat ugly head, I guess you could call it. If you don't brake nice and deep into the corner, the car does exhibit some understeer. But it's not nearly as bad as the understeer I experienced in the 996.2 GT3 I drove just a few weeks ago. The 997 chassis does really feel like a big step on. Now you can induce a little bit of liftoff oversteer, which is nice. It helps you trim your line mid-corner. One of the best sounding engines of all time. Now, one thing I am noticing though, this stock GT3 suspension, definitely a lot harsher than the KWV3 that Jimmy has on his NSX. That suspension really suits that car very well. It's great for daily driving and it's competent enough for canyon driving. But back to this 997 GT3 for a moment. It does have quite harsh suspension. It's a lot less daily driver friendly, which might come as a surprise because this car is 16 years newer than the NSX. But the GT3 from the factory really is tuned to go on a racetrack. It's not as much of a canyon car, I would argue. Does that make it any less enjoyable to drive? Actually, it kind of does. The NSX, you just pop right in and you feel at home, and you don't have to worry about, oh, there's a bump right there on the road, I should try to avoid that. The NSX is better at soaking it up. But when the road does open up a little bit, the GT3 engine is actually more satisfying than that legendary V6. That might seem obvious since this makes 50% more horsepower, but also that just amazing induction sound, that howl, sounds that little bit more motorsport, a little bit more special than the V6. Listen to that. Musical. Getting nice and deep into the brakes, a little bit of trail braking, power out. Getting into a groove with this car now as the road gets a little less twisty. I mean, it's still very twisty, but it's not just tight hairpin after tight hairpin. There's a little bit more high-speed corners here. That's where the GT3 shines. It's not meant for hairpins. Rear engine, rear-wheel drive is just not the best for tackling slow corners. Amazing steering feel. Not quite as much feedback coming through the wheel compared to the NSX, but at least the ratio is quicker and it's lighter. Still a heavy rack by modern standards, but you don't have to manhandle it in the way that you do with the NSX. This is a very unforgiving road surface. The GT3 also has very long gearing. I mean, second gear I think goes to probably 80 plus miles an hour. Granted, this car has the power to justify the long gearing, but on a tight canyon road, I'd still rather have the short gears in the NSX. The shifter feel in the GT3 is actually really good. It's far better than a base 997 Carrera shifter. It's higher effort, but it has a nice notchy and mechanical feel, but it's not as buttery smooth as that amazing 5-speed Honda shifter. So while the NSX makes you work harder at the steering wheel, the GT3 makes you work harder at the shifter as well as the pedals. The clutch in a GT3 is so heavy. It is one of the heaviest stock clutches I've ever felt. Overall, the GT3 just feels more heavy duty, if that makes sense. Whew. Tiny bit of power on understeer, but again, it's mild. Steering gets real light in the hairpins like here. And when you power out, you feel that diff working in the back, trying to maximize traction. Such a great car to drive. 997 GT3. This is the sweet spot. If you want a raw feeling but not overly archaic GT3 experience, the 997.1 really is amazing. The 997.2 does have some improvements. It does make the suspension a little bit more compliant, but whether you go with a .1 or a .2, it doesn't matter. The 997 generation GT3 is one of the best driving cars of all time. So which one would I rather have? NA1 NSX or 997.1 GT3? Well, consider that an early NA1 NSX with a reasonable amount of miles goes for around $70,000 to $80,000 today. A comparable condition 997.1 GT3 will cost you about 50% more, somewhere in the 120 to 130 range. That's a lot more money. Is the driving experience worth it? Some people are just die-hard 911 fans. They love the look of the car. They love the challenge of driving a rear engine, rear wheel drive machine. And if you're one of those people, then you already know the answer. You probably already have a 911 in the garage. But for me, I like that mid-engine balance of the NSX. It really does make the car feel a lot more approachable to drive hard. And coupled with the superior shifter, the incredible steering, and of course all the history, there's a reason I have an NSX in my garage and not a GT3. But there's also a reason I don't have a GT3 next to an NSX, and that's simply because of the fact that these cars have gotten out of reach for me in terms of pricing. It's not going to feel incredibly fast by today's performance car standards, but this car, like the NSX, is about the feel, the subjective feel, not the numbers. And both of these cars feel absolutely incredible to drive. It's like going back in time, either 33 years in the case of the NSX or 16 years in the GT3. These cars truly are time capsules. Let me know what you think of the NSX versus GT3 comparison. If you've driven both on the same road even, which one caused you to have a bigger smile on your face when you walked out of the car? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know what other comparison videos you'd like to see in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.